This podcast and its related content are intended for listeners aged 18 and above. Some episodes may include sensitive topics such as trauma, abuse, or mental health struggles that could be emotionally triggering or distressing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This podcast is created for educational and awareness purpose only and does not constitute legal, medical, or psychological advice. Welcome to Suno, the listening circle. The name Suno in Hindi means to listen, and more importantly, to be understood. This podcast aims to create a circle of understanding for South Asian women primarily, and anyone else who may be interested in these topics, from changing family structures to work-life balance, motherhood, singlehood, and much more. We are hoping to shake off stigma one conversation at a time. This season, we're looking at separation and divorce in the South Asian context. And I'm your host, Harveen. At one point, after my own divorce, I was stopped in my tracks by a book cover. And the title of the book in bold letters said, "Divorce is normal." But on the cover, the words shameful, scary, and wrong were scratched out, implying, of course, that divorce is not scary, not shameful, or wrong, it's normal. And I was like, this is definitely going to be a book that could speak to my own inner dialogues during my own divorce journey. And today we are fortunate to be talking with the author of that book, Shaswati Siva, who's an author and a consultant with over 13 years of experience in advertising. And her book is the result of her own divorce experience, as well as based on interviews with more than 150 women. We'll talk about how this came about, but in the middle of her own divorce, she connected with other women who were going through a similar process and also created a support group for anyone who was going through it. It was heartening to read the stories in the book, how despite education, financial independence, Indian families and the patriarchy can sometimes keep women and couples stuck in unhappy marriages, and the legal systems do not make this any easier. The whole process is most stressful and isolating experience for most couples, and almost every woman's story echoed mine too in so many ways. With that, I would like to welcome our guest today, Shaswati, and thank you once again for taking your time out for this. Hi, Harveen. Thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction, and I really look forward to talking to you. So, Shaswati, writing a book is no easy feat. Tell us why you chose to write the book and specifically the choice of the title with the words that was scratched out. What did these words mean for you?
So I think for me, writing a book was a very intimidating experience. I don't think I set out thinking that will one day write a book about divorce. It just so happened in my journey because divorce is normal for me existed way before the book. When I was talking about it on Instagram, I had gone on TEDx, I had done a few collaborations on different videos. And so for me, I was already very open about the topic and I was already talking about it with friends on Instagram, with my family, etc. So it wasn't a new topic per se for me. I was very fortunate that Penguin reached out to me saying that there's a lot of content over here and we think that it can be made into a book. And for the cover, I think I wanted divorce as normal to be very prominent. I wanted the normal to become very prominent. So a lot of times what happens is when I say divorce is normal, a lot of people fixate on the divorce part of it and they say this is a very controversial statement to make. But my focus is not on divorce, it's actually on normal. So I wanted to put those other words to bring out the emphasis on normal.
And in fact, when I read those scratched out words, actually, those also resonated with me because at that time, I had no idea how internalized certain aspects of shame was for me. And in fact, you have a section in the last chapter of your book which really stood out for me, where you write, and I'm going to read that passage out for you. You say, "I've been accused of glorifying divorce by constantly speaking about it, and I'm really not. My efforts have been to show the world that divorce is merely a choice, one that should be made keeping in mind that it could be the best decision individually as well as for the couple. I'm expanding the canvas for divorce to be more widely accepted. Like many other life choices,
Let's accept the decision at that moment and then move on. It isn't the end of the world for the people getting divorced. Neither does this choice need to bring upon shame on any family. It actually all starts with the word itself. The reactions when you hear the word divorce need to be changed. When I read this, I was clear that I needed to have this bold author on our podcast because this word isn't very widely accepted. There is still a little bit of a taboo to it. And your book offers an honest look at your experience, but also the interviews that you've had with other women. How did you decide to also combining your story with that of the others? Firstly, thank you so much for the very kind words about the book. And coming to the question that you asked, that's actually a really interesting question. I feel it's such a taboo topic that people don't talk about it as much. So I really felt the need to bring out more stories because I know that a lot of these people have no way of bringing out their story. They are not going to talk about it on Instagram. They might be talking about it privately in their circles, and that's totally fine. There is no pressure on people to talk about it. But somewhere somebody needs to bring out these stories for other people to hear. There are so many people around us. Sometimes there are people in your secondary circle who probably gone through a divorce and you don't even know about it. You have absolutely no idea that they have even gone through something like this. And it just made sense for me. I did not have any sort of shame associated with attaching something like divorce to me. I'm also almost like the poster child for divorce at this point in time. And I don't mind being that. As in fact, I take pride in being that. So it was really important for me to echo those sentiments and bring out those stories because I really think that makes a big difference for somebody who is going through a very dark phase in their life, maybe going through a divorce, maybe going through a lot of neglect, abuse, multiple things that can lead up to a divorce, for them to believe that there are lots more people who have gone through this. So there is A, there is hope, and B, there is that feeling of, that, okay, there are other people who I resonate with and who will probably understand me. I love it when you say that you're the poster child of divorce because and I can actually see that. And I can see that also in your social media and how you've taken on this topic. We have a dearth of voices from South Asia talking openly about a topic that is hush hush all the time. And people like me can then also feel more confident when we have such spaces for a conversation as well. So, what is your feeling now after the book has been, it's a reality? One thing that really eased my anxiety about the book was like, after it came out, and a lot of my friends read it. And that was the first time they were all reading it. When they told me that it was such an easy read, like you made divorce sound easy. It's, of course, an important thing that you go through. It's a very big life event, but you are going to move on. You're going to become a happier person. So I think that was something that felt very validating that people did not feel weight when they read the book. They actually felt lighter when they read the book. That was my ultimate goal, that it has to be something of help to people and not really something that makes you feel like I can never touch it again. It's a very heavy topic. And I think you definitely made that happen. And when I read your book, that part where you said that this is not the end of the world, it really resonated with me because I was very irritated with certain comments I was receiving around me and somebody talking to you or viewing you with some pity. And I'm like, I'm carrying on with my career, my life, and everything. So reading those words was also validating for someone having experienced this. I'm going to circle back to what we mentioned in your introduction as well, that we were referring to the support group. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the genesis of that group and how did it come about? How is that going now? Okay, so the support group I started in 2019, which is when I was talking about this topic a lot online. So I think through my own divorce, which was in 2018, I felt the lack of support. I really felt it. Of course, I had support from my family, which I'm very grateful for, from my friends, which also I'm very grateful for. But I really saw that this infrastructure was lacking where there is nothing to tell a group of people that you're going to be okay and to connect with others who are kind of going through the same thing. I had to literally hunt down people on Twitter and stuff like that to be like, is there somebody who's been divorced who will talk to me? So it was very difficult to find people because at that point of time, and I'm talking about 2017, 2018, where nobody was openly talking about it. So in 2019, we started in-person sessions. So there was a friend of mine who runs a cafe, and he very sweetly lent me the space Sunday mornings. And we used to go there from like about 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, not more than 10 or 11 people, so that we keep it intimate and we give everybody enough space and time to talk about what they are going through. And we had completely different people, like 62-year-old woman, and I had a 21-year-old in the same group, going through completely different situations, but still going through a divorce. So it was really amazing how people could connect. And there were so many people who became friends through this support group. The energy in the room was really something else. It was beautiful. I still get goosebumps thinking about. And then 2020 is when the pandemic hit and everything went online. The support group also went online. So we would meet every Sunday. This time it was more accessible to everybody because people literally from across the globe could join us. We didn't really need to wait to be available to come to a certain place in Bombay. And during the pandemic is when a lot of people were feeling very rough because the courts had shut down. There was no way of getting out of abusive relationships, which means that for a lot of women, the men who were abusing them stayed back in the house. Only respite they would get is when people would go to work. So that was absent. People were home the entire time. So that meant that a lot of people were potentially at a lot more risk, particularly women I'm talking about, based on the experiences I have heard on the support group. So I think that just made spaces like this so much more important at that point of time for those people to have that little bit of a space to like open up. There was one story that really stuck with me and it continues to haunt me till today is that there was one person who was speaking to me from under the bed on the support group. She was whispering. She was hiding under the bed. She had just been beaten up and she was very helpless and she had nowhere to go. We were bang in the middle of the pandemic and, it was extremely difficult for that person to go anywhere, get any sort of help. So we figured out how to help her. Eventually, once the pandemic eased down, I got back in touch with her. She got out of the house. She is much safer right now. But at that point of time, it was so important that she at least had this space where she could come and pour out what she was going through. So this continued almost all of 2020. And then I moved it to a Telegram channel. So right now it is hosted on Telegram where there are about 700, 800 people talking at any point of time. And it's accessible 24 hours and you can go, you can talk, you can connect with people. So one amazing story, considering I shared a sad one, I'll share a happy one as well. In 2020, there were two people who met on a support group and it was a Sunday. And I remember it was a small group. It was just 5, 6 people that particular day. And they ended up meeting and they got married last week. So it was beautiful. It was so special that two people who came there to like talk about their previous marriages ended up meeting, ended up connecting. So I think the support group has been incredible in lots of ways.
This is a whole whirlwind of experience also in managing and running a support group, Shaswati, because it's a complex area. And if someone was in distress, you took it upon yourself to also deal with that practically. Self-care is equally important here, especially when you're dealing with so many people who are indeed sharing very vulnerable stories, which can also leave an impact on you. If we can back up a bit from this moment that we're talking about now and go back to a little bit of understanding about your own background and growing up years and how they shaped your values, what do you think made you into a person who found herself founding a movement of sorts in this area?
I think I'm a very different person as an adult versus the person that I was while I was growing up. I think I was a very underconfident kid. I don't think I was very open about my opinions. That's something, I sort of understood about myself probably in my 20s, where I feel like I have very strong opinions. So it kind of spilled into multiple things that I did. Whatever I took up very passionately. Like when I turned vegan, I wanted to start a vegan business, and that's what I did. When I wanted to talk about divorce, I spoke about it as a thing that I'm not ashamed of. And I think I wanted to really prove that I'm not ashamed of it. So I think as a person, I am positive person. Of course, I have my extremely cynical moments, but I think all the while growing up, I always try to see that there is some silver lining to every dark cloud, and I always try to look for it. My divorce could have just been gotten over and I would have just moved on with my life. But I think the fact that I really felt so alone during the process of divorce, I didn't want other people to feel like that. I was like, can we make that difference? Can we show that we don't really need to be alone, and we don't need to be isolated, and we don't need to be exposed to the kind of stigma and judgment that actually comes our way. And so for me, I did really think of it as like a campaign that I was going to do and this big thing that it was going to become. For me, it was just a few posts on Instagram to be like, hey, we talk about so many things, we share so many things. This is just another thing I'm going to share. The fact that it took off and it became a bigger thing was honestly something I also sort of evolved with. I did not plan it, but I think the more I spoke to people and the more stories that I came across, I realized that the stigma is so deep. There is so much work to be done. There is so much left, and there are so many people to educate, and that includes educated people. So I really think that for a lot of people, it's very easy to say, oh, yeah, divorce is normal. Sure, divorce is normal. We are normalizing it. But to think of the number of people, even today in our country, who don't think it is normal, who have a massive stigma against it, and who have a very different mindset towards it, I feel there is so much work to be done. So I really think that goes a long way in shaping me as a person, things I want to do. That yeah, I don't feel like stopping.
And you shouldn't. Do you think that your education or the kind of upbringing or value system you grew up in with your parents, did that help and facilitate in where you are? Or this is something that you've realized later in your life when you are dealing with these issues head on?
Definitely later. But I will give credit to my parents who never stopped me from voicing my opinions, who never said that I shouldn't talk about it. Because that happened a lot with my relatives who told my mom, okay, bad enough she got divorced, but why is she talking about it? Why am I seeing it on like Instagram and Facebook? What is the need? So I think my parents really stood with me to say that it's up to her what she wants to do with it. She got married, she got divorced. Now it's her thing. If she chooses to talk about it, it's none of our business. And not in a way that they didn't care. They would share all my posts and they would be very supportive and they would tell me that what I'm doing is the right thing. And later on, when they realized that it's actually helping so many people and how committed I was to the support group and how, of course, they were worried about how it was affecting me. But more than that, they would be very proud of the fact that I was able to help how many ever number of people that I was able to help. So I think definitely credit to my parents for helping me become my own person. But the voice I found for myself was much later for sure.
Okay, so you did grow up with kind of parents that allowed you to speak your mind. How were you viewing the idea of marriage in your life?
I think I was very young when I got married. I was only 24. So I think I was pretty naive in the way I considered it. And I think I was more interested in the wedding jing bang of it. And oh my God, it's so fancy and it's so nice and, things like that. I don't think I had the maturity to fully understand. I say this in hindsight. Of course, at that point of time, I felt like, oh yeah, we'll do it. What's the big deal? But I think nobody goes into a marriage expecting it to be a divorce. Everybody goes into it thinking it's going to last forever. So when I look back, I look at it very differently. And it's been 10 years now. So I think a lot of it I have also forgotten or probably blocked out because it just feels like a completely different person a lifetime ago. But from what I can remember, I was just too young.
Now, going from your individual experience to rather the experience of the women that you interviewed and you had some of their stories in the book, of course, everyone's story is unique and different. Is there a commonality that things start out excited and well, and certain types of factors that come into play where problems emerge. So, what were the kind of themes that were emerging?
One thing for me that was very common in a lot of stories was that a lot of people saw red flags, saw issues, but they ignored it. They always thought that, oh, it's something that's going to get okay, or it's going to change once we get married, or it's going to change once we become a family, or it's like a one time thing. It's not going to repeat itself. But for a lot of people, when they look back, they said that I knew it was a red flag, but I ignored it. I knew I shouldn't have. But then I was so afraid of losing the person that I did not, that I went through with the marriage.
Yeah, and I think I can also relate to that because it is a personal life decision, and you can spend a lot of time in figuring out that is this a big problem? Is it a small one? And it will get okay in time, as you said, and you never really know what it's going to cascade into. And you keep also justifying that behavior to yourself. If there are any common red flag issues that women shared for any listeners at this stage, that could be something useful for them to know as well.
I think a few of them would be the relationship that they share with parents. Like in-laws become a very sour topic for a lot of people who have not discussed boundaries and who have not discussed what it means either to live with them or to have them, in close proximity. So I think in-laws was a very big problem that was kind of similar for a lot of people, especially because these are things you don't think of talking about before getting married. And I think another thing is just behavioral traits, like, picking up on things, small things like how does a person deal with something like anger? How do you deal with disappointment? How do you deal with sadness? How do you deal with grief? Who do you become in these situations where you don't know what the other person is going to respond or be like? That comes as a bit of a shock to a few people because sometimes, and especially anger and disappointment, can be triggering strong emotions. And another one would probably be not discussing about things like children, religion, politics, things between two people that can deeply change the way you feel about another person. That is probably something that is a little lacking when people get into marriages so quickly. And so many of the people I spoke to were also arranged marriages, and that's so common in India. So there isn't a lot of time to understand the person so much. There is like a Kundli match and families that start talking, and then you are in a rush to just get this through, and then you get married. This was particularly for those people who didn't have enough time before the marriage to get to know that person other than knowing them superficially. What your favorite color is. Like, I need way, way, way more than that.
And do you also think that the kind of issues you were seeing from the women, there was a difference in issues that were in an arranged marriage setup and a love marriage setup, or eventually the issues were the same?
I don't want to bucket the issues into, one or two things because I really feel for every person it was very different. So while there might be a few commonalities and while there may be few things that overlap, I still want to say that every story was unique in its own way. The difficulties and the kind of guilt or the kind of sadness that takes over, that was pretty much the same in a lot of people. But the reasons and the issues that kind of led up to a divorce, if there were any, I think were extremely different.
I'm just wondering if you think that living together before marriage, if was widely more accepted in our society, people would have then more time to exactly see these changes of how people react over time and learn to navigate that or realize what works for them and what doesn't. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think living in is so important before getting married, and I am all for it. I lived in before I got married in 2024. There is a lot of excitement meeting a person every once in a while and dating and going out and doing all of those things. But there is so much to learn about another person in the mundane reality of everyday routine. I think there is so much that we don't realize that is actually happening when we need to see them every morning for your coffee, for your meals, while you go to sleep, everything, you get to see that person in their state. Even a bath routine, for example, when you usually go out to meet somebody, yeah, okay, you take a bath, but how are you at home? Are you just like once in 3 days kind of a person, or are you like going to take bath every day? Do you leave your coffee mug for the next 7 hours from where you had your morning coffee? Do you put it back? It's the small things like that that actually make it a bigger thing, because ultimately that's the life you're going to live for the next how many ever years that you live together. So it's really important that you are compatible in your everyday routine.
That's fantastic tip for our listeners, Shaswati, that small things outside of the sparks, especially learning path routines of the other person, are important. Coming back to also another red flag that you were mentioning about the family dynamics and structure, do you also think that the South Asian or Indian joint family structures, where also families are generally, even without the joint family structures, sometimes very enmeshed in each other's lives and decisions, do you think that also plays a role in post marriage tensions, often also accentuating the issue between the couple? Where sometimes the husband could be caught between navigating two worlds. What are your thoughts on it? What also emerged through the interviews of the women you spoke to?
It's the most complicated thing about marriages. And I think, honestly, for women, it's a lot more difficult than men, because women are uprooted. In most cases, you're living with the husband's family, where the woman has left her house, her family, her people, and has come into this particular house. And I think a lot of houses expect the woman to come into the house and just merge, become one with the family, and just go on with life. Whereas I think the correct thing to do would be to understand that a whole new person and a whole new life of theirs is coming into this particular house. And how do you adjust things around this person, and not how this person is going to just blindly adjust into everything that has already been going on in the house. So I think it makes a big difference when you think about how much a particular family can interfere in the business of the couple. So in a lot of decisions, it could be financial, it could be emotional, it could be even pressure to like make a baby once you have gotten married. There are so many different pressures that kind of come on the couple, and particularly on the women, from families, which I think make it very difficult. It adds a lot of tension, and especially say the couple is not getting along, then all of this is only added pressure. It makes it one layer more difficult to be in this marriage, and makes it so much more difficult to even think of getting out of it, because it just becomes that much more complicated. That's why I think before getting married, to draw those boundaries and to be clear, even out of my own example, I had this with my husband, where we're like, now we need to realize that we are a unit. It's not that there is this family unit of like mother, father, son, and a daughter-in-law is joining that unit. It's not that. It is mother, father, and then there is husband, wife. We are a separate unit, and we need to be very clear about the fact that we are a separate unit, and we are starting a separate family, which means that we started from scratch, and not that there is an existing family that I am joining.
You're so right, Shaswati. I'll share an example from my own marriage where we were living in Germany and we are looking for a house. And after a house viewing, the first call is happening with the family back in India, who are then trying to decide where I'm going to live with my partner. And no matter whether you are in the same physical space or not, but that mental boundary that this is a separate household, and that's where your focus is from both the man and the woman. I think that's sometimes very much enmeshed in our cultures. Coming back to the topic of divorce, you also mention in your book that there is still a taboo associated with divorce. Why do you think in South Asian families this is still associated with some degree of shame and taboo? Even with the most educated people, I have found that degree of silence on this topic. Where is this rooted in?
As a culture, we view divorce as a failure. It's seen as failure of something that you were supposed to do only once in your life. Particularly, I think for women, it's also seen as you are used goods. What will we do with you right now? for a lot of families, that's very true, where they don't want the daughter of the house to come back as somebody who has been somebody's wife now. How do we accept her? When did she stop being your daughter? She's still your daughter, no matter whose wife she is. So I think people tend to forget that, and really they start to associate that woman as somebody's wife, not somebody's daughter. So it's seen as this massive letdown. How could you not make it work? What could be so bad that you could not keep this marriage going? So I think that is where a lot of the stigma comes in. And for a lot of people, they don't know how to stand up against the people who are talking about it. Now, if your neighbor is coming and asking you, why is your daughter come home? That is your business. That's happening inside your house. You need to be able to say, hey, it's my daughter. This is her house. She has come back. My choice, her choice, not your business. You could say that it's my business and, I choose to get out of this marriage. But the way you say it also makes a big difference. The more you go into this zone of being apologetic about it and making it a thing of sorrow, then I think it's easy for people to sort of prey on you at that point of time, because you're very vulnerable. But the more you show that you are confident and you've taken this decision that is good for you and that you are owning this decision, the lesser people will talk.
That's a good way of putting it, Shaswati. And I'm just thinking that when we look at the situation where, say, a woman is making that decision, and sometimes financial independence that doesn't exist right now, or when parents who've even seen a woman struggle with an abusive marriage have sometimes said that she should still continue to stay back with the families. I think those are really rooted in the way our culture views this. But I'm even wondering that imagine a woman like that still finds the courage to leave the family and get divorced. I think regaining that confidence and having that voice, which is less shameful and less apologetic, also takes time, because it's not going to be a day to day switch. I think some of us, maybe we can also have a mask on for the world even when we are processing it. But at least in my experience, some of the women have actually led such trying times to get out of something toxic that they just haven't had support. And I think that's where the support system you end up having, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, makes such a big difference. Because like in yours, I had a lot of family support, which I know gave me the voice to not be apologetic about it and to be open about it. You need to be ready to tell people about it, and you need to take your own time to do that. Exactly what you said. I completely agree with that. It's not like today you take a decision and tomorrow you're starting to tell people about it. You slowly come into yourself and you become that person who is okay to start talking about it. And once you tell 1, 2, 3, 4 people, you start to get more confident in the way you talk about it also. And the way you communicate it becomes a lot easier and a lot better. It's almost like you're practicing it over and over again, that at one point of time how you want to say it, how much of detail do you want to give, how much do you actually want to share, and just keep it limited to that thing to say, don't ask me beyond this, please. This is all I want to share right now. Just let the rest go. That's just something that comes with time. And also with your family members who said that, okay, she got a divorce, but why does she have to go talk about it on Instagram? That too can be a very common narrative in Indian families and South Asian families. I found a very interesting passage in your book related to this point, and it says, the onus of bringing divorce-related stigma does not, I repeat, does not lie solely with the people getting divorced. Obviously, you as someone who got a divorce, you did choose to go public and provide these resources for others. But what did you mean by this phrase? And who does have the responsibility or the power to break down the stigma related to divorce?
So, to break this down, where does the stigma come from? The stigma comes from each and every person who is making it difficult for somebody else. And sometimes a lot of people might do it without even realizing that they are doing it. So the reason I say that it's not solely on the person who's getting divorced is because I feel there is a divorce around every one of us. There is somebody in your family, in your friend circle, in your secondary circle, where you hear of such divorces, how are you reacting to that divorce? For example, somebody tells you they're getting divorced. What is your first reaction? Is it that you're sorry? Does it even warrant you being sorry? What if it's the best decision for them? What if sorry is not the right thing that person wants to hear? So then you have contributed to them feeling really bad about it when probably they're feeling very good about it. When you're announcing your divorce to people, and if you don't want to hear sorry, tell them that, tell me congratulations. It's a good thing that happened to me. Tell me, woohoo, this happened. So then you are at least controlling that narrative. So it's really important for us to understand that stigma can be in the smallest of statements and the maybe even smallest of words.
I guess you're saying that educating people on how to respond to divorce can be pretty meaningful in addressing stigma. Also, letting them know how you're feeling and what you need. And I actually do have a question for you on this because I generally did have a supportive environment in the sense that my family were supporting me in my decision. However, I felt that they often did not have the right vocabulary. And at some point, I started to compartmentalize as I felt I was coming through a very difficult situation and I needed the support, but not necessarily the choice of words. And sometimes they would trigger me, but other times I would just park them aside because I had no capacity to deal with, as I felt as if they meant well and they were happy that I was out of this situation, but did not know how to care for me or truly understand me. And I'm wondering, how was your experience based on the women you've talked to? And should I have drawn boundaries with the people who did not get it? Or what have you learned about navigating such people during this period, as each person's words can also leave a lingering impact on oneself? And in moments of extreme doubt, you can also be easily swayed. So, how does one keep that clarity? How do you know who to tune in and who to tune out in this situation?
This is why having a really close knit support system is really important, because then you just have the people who you know are your safe spaces, who you know you can say anything to, and they will only help you sort of break down your thoughts. For me personally, I had 4 friends and I would go to each of them for a different thing. Like when I really wanted like a lot of love from somebody, I know which friend to go to. When I really wanted like a reality check, which friend to go to. When I want to be super petty and just really, really petty for no reason, I know which friend to go to. Somebody to just make me laugh, I know who to go to for that. And I think my friends learned a lot through my experience also, because there were, of course, there were times, like you said, there were things that they would say that would trigger or unintentionally make you feel a little bad, or this thing where you don't know why they asked a certain thing. So I think I was very open with my feelings. So if something triggered me or if something made me feel bad, I would immediately say it. I'm like, hey, that made me feel really bad. And, maybe you shouldn't have said it this way, which happened only a few times. That's why I stuck to only 4 people. And I think those 4 people made it very easy on me, and they really supported me and learned along with me how does one deal with the divorce. So I think that's the same advice that I would give others also, that you find those people who are going to be there with you every single day of this journey. And once you have identified those people, then they will come along that journey with you and understand along with you. And there were a lot of times when my parents have triggered me, actually, where they would say something and they would get really emotional about it. And then there would be like this fight between us and angry words exchanged and all of that. And that's also because with your parents, you can be yourself the most. You can bring out your angriest self, I think, particularly for moms and daughters. So it was very easy for me to take out that anger on them. With my friends, I had a lot more open communication and more patience. So I think it's important to give them also that space and time to kind of learn whether it's the right vocabulary, whether it is the right things to say, whether it is the right time to make a joke, for example.
I'm also just recalling that in my own case, actually, they were trying to understand my decision of staying for so long with many different challenges. And those things being asked in that early phase was difficult because I was going through that self-reflection that why did I allow certain things? Why did I let this happen? And many people would exactly use this phrase. And that's what I meant, that when I would reflect on it deeply, even though I have seen divorces, accepted it in my life, and I own that for myself. But in that moment, that time decision, why did I let so much time go by? What were my insecurities? Is where I figured that maybe there is something, some association with shame and stigma that I don't realize, and it's just in my subconscious. Because what was preventing me? There was nothing education wise, family support, financial independence. Somebody like me had everything at my disposal, but yet I prolonged that decision for myself. So I think that's the part of the vocabulary and trigger point, but I see what you mean, that so targeting what you need from whom can be a good strategy to deal with it. It's an investment that you make in your friends of understanding. I went through a divorce, but there could be multiple other things that like other friends go through. One of my friends had a really bad health episode that lasted more than a couple of months. So how do you learn to deal with that? It's a new thing. It's always a learning curve. And you need to give that time for the people around you to understand that. That's so true. Time is such a big factor that they really haven't processed, whereas we've spent quite a bit of time on it. So we've talked about family, culture, patriarchy, stigma, and such a variety of topics. Do you think there are any other aspects of South Asian, or in this case, Indian culture, that do play a role in keeping people doubting and afraid to leave a bad or unsatisfactory marriage? If we leave aside the legal aspects for a minute, one thing that I really want to tell you, Harbeen, is that I feel very strongly that unfortunately in our country, we don't have no fault divorces. So there has to be a reason why you're getting divorced. So that's a different thing. Like you said, that's a legal thing. But a lot of women that I spoke to also feel very guilty about leaving a marriage that didn't have abuse in it. So there's a lot of this thing of like, there's nothing wrong with him. He's a good person, but I just feel so bad. I just want to leave, but I don't think I can leave because he has not hit me. He has not abused me. He has not verbally said anything. But I think we need to realize that if you are unhappy, that's enough reason to leave a marriage. You don't need something drastic and dramatic to happen to actually leave the marriage. I understand in no way am I saying it's easy. Leaving any marriage is difficult. But the fact that there is so much guilt associated with it and so many people continue to stay in marriages despite being unhappy only because of the fact that they feel it's not good enough a reason to leave a marriage. And I think that's very society led, that you just made to feel that, "Oh, but he's not doing anything to you. You're lucky. Count your stars that he doesn't do anything to you. So just buck up and stay in the marriage. Why would you think of leaving such a person?" People. And I think the women I spoke to who have left such marriages also are so much happier today because they found themselves. They found whole new life outside of this. And a lot of them continue to remain friends with their exes, which goes to say that maybe you were better off as friends than you were as two people in a marriage. I think being unhappy is good enough reason. And I guess what you're saying is also about wanting just happiness in life, not just good enough and there's no abuse and hence I'll stay. So we do need to embrace that and allow that to be a part of our culture and accept this. And we do have another episode where we talk to a lawyer on the legal aspects of what you also said, that in India, we don't have a no-fault divorce, and also in many other South Asian countries that doesn't exist. So we'll cover the legal aspects there. But when we talk about abusive marriages, Shaswati, and there are also the different justifications that people give themselves, did that also come up as a topic with the women you spoke to? You did mention one of the cases indeed, where this woman did reach out for help during the support group. But were there other situations that emerged? Multiple. I think abuse is so common in so many marriages. Yeah, you will sometimes not even believe it that this person who speaks so confidently and who you think is doing so well in life actually has been through abuse. I think it boggles my mind when I hear some of these stories because it's devastating to hear
what people have gone through. I think that for a lot of people, they start talking about the abuse only much later when they've been able to process it and give some thought to it and be open about the fact that this happened to me. I think for a lot of time when you are in abusive relationships, there is a lot of denial about being in one, and there's a lot of shame associated with saying that somebody has hit me, somebody has treated me badly, somebody has sexually abused me. And another very common thing is that the women don't want their friends or somebody close to them to judge their partners. Because instantly when you tell somebody that somebody has abused you, your instant reaction is to villainize that person. And a lot of women don't want that judgment towards their husbands or partners. Then with abuse, it takes a long time for that person to actually come out and talk about what they went through, because there's a lot of processing time that is involved in accepting that this has happened to them.
True. And this is also maybe associated with the stigma of divorce itself. Could it be the lack of financial independence? Could it be parents' lack of support? Or just not having that confidence in yourself to get out of it with ease? There can be so many psychological aspects as well there, but it is in fact a harsh reality. That's a real shame. Maybe we can move to post-divorce process of healing. Divorce process in itself is so tedious and it can take toll on couples and families, and let alone your own individual healing process. What was the most significant factor in your healing journey that helped you? What have you realized about yourself or rediscovered in this journey about yourself?
That I will never take my freedom for granted. I was over the moon when my divorce got finalized, and I went all out in terms of the things that I wanted to do, the people I wanted to stay connected with. I threw a fabulous divorce party for my friends, which we still talk about it very fondly. It started off with that, and then I feel like my life was a party. I enjoyed myself. I just did everything that I never thought I could do again. It was just beautiful, and I think that played a big role in my healing, to just focus on myself, things that are good for me, take care of myself, put my energy into things that are actually going to make me super happy. So I think that played a very big role. And I think that the 4 people that I kept very close to me during the divorce, we stayed connected for such a long time. They are the most important people in my friend circle even today. The fact that I was able to hold them so close when things were going so badly made a big difference, because I was able to also celebrate it with them when things were going so well for me. They were able to truly understand where my happiness was coming from, because they have seen me literally in the dumps. Anybody could have seen me happy, but the context of that happiness and the freedom that I had, only few people truly understood where that was actually like even coming from. Therapy also played a very big part in the healing. And I think talking about divorce openly, which I did right after my divorce or towards the end of it, my freedom felt very real and it felt so precious. I don't take that for granted. Whenever something good happens in my life, I simply thank the universe that I was able to be here. I was able to do this. So I think it has given me a different perspective on life itself since the divorce.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Shaswati. As you said, to not take this freedom for granted, this is a very powerful statement and a great thing for people to tune into if they are amidst also their divorce journey and going through some hard experiences. That could probably be also a motivation to get out of something that's just not working for them. It doesn't have to be abusive. It doesn't have to be a shame factor. And there are positive things to look forward to. There are also a lot of learnings for our audience to get motivation from your well-articulated book if they find themselves stuck with some decisions. So let's change gears a bit. Come to present day. Where are you today, personally, professionally?
I'm very happily married today. I got married a year and a half ago, and it's been the best decision in a very long time. Doing really well personally, professionally. I am a creative consultant and I'm working with multiple clients at this point of time. I have diverted my energies towards creating more video content for divorce, started a series called Things I Hear as a Divorced Person. So just different experiences of what are the things that we continue to hear and what are the things that we face and how do we sort of get over it. That's where my energy is going towards with this topic.
Congratulations on your wedding. And it's great to hear that you are embracing your freedom fully and also able to find the right partner for you to accompany you through your life journey. And I have seen your latest social media content, and it's fantastic to see that too. I have one more question. Do you think post divorce there would be right time to start dating? What tips or learnings do you have for people navigating dating post divorce?
I have a theory which I have tested with and the people I know who've been divorced. And it's a very sad theory. But there are people who have proved me wrong, then I'm really sorry. But this is just based on the stuff I have seen and including myself. Is that the first person you date right after your divorce is always a disaster. It does not go well. But you spend a little more time working on yourself on a more serious note. You need to take some time off because you have been through a major life event that is very difficult. And no matter how easy the divorce was, the decision is still difficult and there's still a lot to come out of. And for us, most marriages in India, at least, is very connected to family. So there's a lot to undo and lot to come out of. So take that time to work on yourself and take that time to just understand who you are and start enjoying your company. I think the right time to start dating is when you realize that you are very comfortable being on your own and you need a partner who will not complete you, but who is going to complement you. Because there is a void after you get divorced. There was a life that you had and a life that you imagined, and now that's not there, and now it's just you. So then there is a little bit of that readjusting to say that, okay, what does your life look like right now? What does it mean for you to be by yourself? You really need to come to terms with that. I highly recommend therapy also for this, where you kind of understand where you are in that self journey of loving yourself, of understanding yourself, of accepting yourself. Once you are at a point where you feel really comfortable with that, then I think is a good time to start dating.
So, having a self reflective journey where you are ready to accept things is more important than a set timeline for dating post divorce.
Also, one more thing is that during a divorce or right after a divorce, you're very vulnerable. So it's very easy to make a bad choice at that point of time because we feel that void. So it's very important to be comfortable with yourself, and you should date when you feel like you want somebody to add value to your life and not just because there is something missing in your life because there is no partner.
What's the one piece of advice you'd give someone who knows someone going through divorce to help be that ally, to help break the stigma surrounding it?
I think would be to just listen to that person. I think there are a lot of cues that people give when they are going through a difficult time.
Fantastic answer there, Shaswati. So this brings us to the end of our questions. Is there anything you want to say that we haven't asked and that's on your mind that you would like to share?
Yes, to all the women who are listening, be financially independent. I think that's really important. Even if you're in the happiest of marriages, have a separate fund for yourself. Keep money on the side for yourself because it's just good sense to do that. And I think being financially independent is the most important thing over anything else too, because that gives us the most power to make our own decisions.
I totally echo what you said. This has been a very insightful episode. There are so much more insights for our listeners to also gain from your book. And I hope those of you who are either in the journey or have already been through this journey pick up this book as a good reference point to learn from.
Thank you so much, Harveen. It was lovely speaking with you.
I really loved that conversation. But one thing that was stuck in my thoughts is the topic of the support of friends. And I'm almost jealous of Shaswati when she says that she had such a good friend support system and that really helped us through this process. And perhaps like myself, I'm sure there could be many others who did not have that, who did not have the support of family and friends. In my case, I did have the support of my family and to some extent some friends. But I had had such a isolating experience during my married years that I had lost a lot of friendships. And I think during my healing journey or coming back to myself, it's not just the loss of the years of certain amount of my life or how a marriage did not work out, a certain shift in my own identity. The loss of very important friends in my life has really stayed with me. And all I can say is time will heal that. But most importantly, for yourself, on taking that step and making sure that you're taking care of yourself and doing this for yourself is the most important thing. Thank you for joining us. If you valued this conversation, please share the podcast, rate it, and subscribe to Suno wherever you get your podcast from so that you get notifications with each new episode. It helps more people to find us and join this community. You can also find all the details about the guest in the show notes as well as on our social media pages. Please note that this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not replace legal, therapeutic, or other professional guidance that you or someone close to you may need catering to their specific situation. If you are in a dangerous situation, please contact the nearest hotline or authorities where you can find the help you need. Since our podcast caters to global audience, we are unable to share a lot of country-wide resources, but I'm sure your country, your state, your city, wherever you're listening from, has some resources available for you. To share your story or feedback, please reach out to us. Thank you for listening to us, and until next time. Goodbye.